Okay, so you have warned, I think, that the UK risks falling short of its AI and data center expansion goals. What do you see as the main workforce challenges holding the industry back?
Well, I think the AI, absolute, the energy that's behind it is outstripping the labor resources that are there, skilled labor resources are there. So I think that's the main problem. And I think we're not helping ourselves because we're keeping with traditional training patterns. And I think we're not reimagining our approach what we should be doing. So I think that's the key problem statement. We're not keeping pace with the traction of what the market requires. And I think in the UK a little bit because we have 100 data centers coming out in the next 3 to 5 years. There's regulatory red tape, I think, that's causing a little bit of a pause on some of the pacing of what's happening. So we have a bit of time that we really could um, double down and refocus on things that we could do as a group and as a market.
And to that point, I think you've highlighted the potential of what you might call underused talent. So that would be women and flexible workers, I think you identify. So are there any particular things you think the industry can do to better attract and retain these
Oh,
groups?
absolutely. I feel very passionately about this underused talent in the group because I think we're not revisiting. If you think about the makeup of any demographic, we have 50% women in the country, but we have less than 8% in some of the sectors that are working. And we have to accept that the traditional way of how people want to work, including the younger generation that are coming in, they want to have flexible ways of how we work, different ways of how they approach the market. And I think we're still sticking to traditional methods that worked 20, 30 years ago, and I think we're not pausing or giving ourselves time to pause to how we should redesign, look at the entry, look at how people want to work in today's modern world. As we're modernizing with AI and everything with it, we're probably not catching up a little bit as we should with our training approach.
And just following up on that, but so do you think there are a lot of people with the necessary skills, but because of the recruitment and sort of employment conditions, they're just not interested or not succeeding in getting roles? Or is there also potentially a knowledge gap that needs addressing as well?
There is a bit of that as well, but I think the route to market almost is something that we need to really look on. When I look at another sector, if you look at pharmacists and locuming or medical, and they have a qualification and a skill set, they can actually go on portals and they can review and say, I'm available for this many days, this many hours. These are the criteria that are required, and I meet that skill set. And they can log on and bank on for that body of work. I think there is an extraordinary untapped volume of diverse workforce because of many reasons. Um, Perhaps access to training, the right training, or understanding what's there just aren't being tapped into. And I think that once we, get that silver bullet, I think we'll be in a good space.
Okay, and you've explained obviously that traditional labour models are under pressure. Perhaps you can also sort of outline the ways in which flexible, even crowdsourced or non-traditional approaches can help scale the workforce even without compromising, I suppose, safety and quality are perhaps concerns.
I think so. Look, I think there's an element of trust that has to happen across companies as well in how we approach it. If you think about it, every company is trying to do its own thing. It's costing a lot of money. We're trying to, and then you have a kind of a race to the bottom where staff are being, taken across the groups. They're going from pillar A to B. There's more money being offered or whatever. So there's that element, and then there's the untapped market. And I think from that perspective, like crowdsourcing is very interesting for me, and it kind of reverses into what the medical group do. Equally, if you take the likes of the airline sector, Ryanair, for instance, it's unpopular in some, but like I think 2 decades ago, they say this is the criteria that we require. We will train you. You need to pay for that training, but then we guarantee you access to 2 to 3 years work on contract in these criterias in these sectors. So I think it's a case of flipping the model a little bit, not so drastically, and making that a hybrid part of how we approach fulfilling the workforce gaps that we have.
Okay, yeah, I mean, you mentioned that training model there, but you say I think training is key to unlocking that talent.
Yeah.
So you've shared at least one there, but are there other strategies or programs you think work best when it comes to upskilling people? And I guess we're thinking
Yeah.
particularly for data center roles in this case.
There are, there really are. And if you take, if I could, I remember studying on something previously, and if we look at just the pharmaceutical world, that happened in Ireland in, say, the 70s and the 80s when they all migrated, there was a mass shift driven politically and by regulation and the government that all the technical colleges, the apprenticeships, the universities were heavily engaged with all of the American companies. These are the skill sets that are required. I have, and because I was probably in my formative years coming up through that, you could see how with that joined up approach, how getting together, getting smart about it, how are we going to deliver for these pharmaceuticals? We don't have the training programs in our universities and technicals. How are we going to do that? And within a 5 year period, it was extraordinary how that the entire of the group, the universities came together. And that's why Ireland has such a high propensity of scientists, pharma, they self-serve in the country. That's why there's been that extraordinary growth. There's no reason why that model is not lifted and shifted and could be used in the UK or in any country, but it does require a joined up approach. And I think that's the part we're still working in silos. And the pace is so significant. There needs to be something more meaningfully done as a group and a country and a region.
And I presume I think you did reference there, but presumably that's a government sort of level downwards. The government has to almost indicate what's required and everyone else fall into place. Or do you think the academics, the education sector can do it on its own, or where
Yeah,
does the
it was a
responsibility
partnership.
lie? Right.
Literally, it was a very powerful partnership. It was probably driven by the apprentice group in the country originally. Because if you think about the apprentice programs, even here in the, in the UK, you have a lot of people that used to go to university academically. They've now cottoned on to the apprentice programs are actually so powerful and you still get your degree. But the apprentice programs were for more different types of learning and different approaches. So there's still a big segment of people that we need to cater for. So I think there needs to be a review on that across the board. And I don't think it's rocket science, but I do think it takes intelligent, joined up approach. And I do think the technical colleges, the apprentice programs, getting back to work schemes, you have underdeveloped or, you've resources in certain areas in the UK. These parts of the country could really trailblaze and drive this.
Okay, and moving on, I mean, subcontracting widespread in data center projects, but maybe not discussed as much as it could be. But are there risks when sort of standards and training aren't consistent? So I guess people might be worried that
Absolutely.
bringing in a third party, doesn't have the same sort of approach or standards, whatever. So just your thoughts there.
Yeah. So I think first of all, subcontractors are absolutely a hybrid of I think how anyone's delivering in their model today. So and I think yes, it is a cost to keep those standards because it's not having a framework, not having standards, the not having, I think, strong frameworks in place, metrics of how we measure, costs so much money to repair, get right, redo. It's like an own goal sometimes if we don't put the heavy lifting into it up front. So I think from a safety perspective, those frameworks. And again, I think there could be a more joined up approach across the groups rather than every individual company trying to do it. Ev- there could be more help given. This is a really robust framework. This is the standards we're looking for these industries, and giving helps and frameworks like that would be good.
Okay, and in terms of how the sector can scale, it's got to scale pretty rapidly, I guess, with this AI boom and as you mentioned, all those data centers, going to be built. But there's also the issue of maintaining quality, safety, accountability. Are there any particular lessons that can share from your experience in engineering and other roles that you've had, for this data center sector?
Yeah, standardized processes, a cookie cutter approach where you can. I think common standards, they're all critical. Not reinventing the wheel. If you have resilience built into the structures required, and if you don't have, just say if you don't have the resilience, but recognizing that you have a gap and navigating to getting that into your structure, so that you can have a repeatable system set up. That's where success would come from, really.
And I think it's fair to say, one of the few senior women in the data center sector, which is yeah, I've had many discussions where the sort of male, pale, stale, stereotype still exists. But what I want to ask is how your perspective has shaped your approach to leadership and talent development, bearing in mind, as I say, you're, one of sadly few senior women in the sector.
So I will say that I have been so lucky to have worked with some of the most incredible men, leaders. Even if I went back 20, 25 years ago, I got to see the good, the bad, and the ugly of what leadership should look like, could look like. And I know how I was made to feel, and I worked on site as well for 10 years in my formative years. And when you are the only female in the room, it is different. We're not looking for all females, we're looking for a diverse grouping. And for everything I do, it is always about is the group diverse? Are we having multiple voices, or are we hearing from the same people? But how do we look at and tap into certain people that really, if they were given the right guidance, the right support, or shown you can get from here to here by doing these, this, and that, um, I think that's invaluable. That was done for me. Um, I was a tiny cog in the wheel, but I actually felt like I was instrumental in the strategy of the company, but that was down to the leader I had. And so I think it's be very conscious if you're leading people, be very conscious of how you interact in them and their career. And I'd say to the individuals, you have to take control of your career. You equally have to be brave. On occasions, you have to speak up. Sometimes you might say the wrong things, but speak up, push yourself forward, because I think the same insecurities that your male colleagues might have are the same as what you might have. So I think it's a case of just speak up, lean in, drive forward, and look for those opportunities as well and ask for help. And of course, your network is incredibly important.
Yeah, and are there particular steps you think that the industry can take to make data center careers more inclusive? And I suppose the part two to that, and why would that be so critical in terms of meeting the future demand that's coming along?
Yeah, so if you look at, and I think there's a multitude of societies there, networks, forums, online groups, everything. Join them, listen to the dialogues of what's been saying, look for networks and networking groups in your sector. And I think there are many for the data center for females, for diverse groups as well, and join them and help shape it. Because this is so fast moving, you actually can have an instrumental part in having the voice heard, and helping to shape it. So I think be intentional about getting out there and seeing what's there, what's available. And if you're incredibly entrepreneurial, if it's not there and you feel there's a gap, set something up, start small and expand on it.
And as we mentioned, I think at the start of the conversation, clearly AI is going to be driving a massive increase in UK data center capacity by, I mean, 2030 is the plan, but there's obviously issues with power, skills, etc. There's a lot of,
Yeah.
but so yeah, to that point, the opportunities and challenges in terms of workforce planning, industry growth. You are sort of glass half full? Do you think everything can be addressed in the right time frame, or do you worry that lack of suitable workforce will possibly sort of be a bit of a bottleneck for the industry's planned expansion?
Yeah. I think, well, I'm probably always a glass half full person. Um, I think, when you have leaders and stuff like that, we're kind of solution driven mindsets, people. So we kind of figure it out, but what we don't have is the luxury sometimes for reflection, real thought, understanding how we can reimagine it a little bit different. But I do think that from the workforce, tapping into the untapped workforce that's there by new paths to market, sharing somehow with them, with the help of authorities around us and the universities and colleges and apprenticeship program, saying this is the array of roles that are there. These are paths that you could get to this role. Equally, I think in other sectors, sharing with them how the role you're doing over here in this sector is completely transferable to the data center world and sharing that. We see that program management, quality, safety, programming, financial control, everything. There's so many aspects of it that are transferable, legal, and everything. So I think from that perspective, it's not shouting about data centers and it's all about buildings that are taking all the water, taking all the power. It's a case of it's the society is driving that demand, and you can be part of this next sort of um, generation of digitalization that's happening across the world. So I think we can attract people by promoting it more positively.
Yeah, and in terms of that, sort of global, clearly there are countries and maybe regions that are further ahead of us when it comes to it. So, in terms of your vision, what do you think is, I guess, achievable when it comes to building a sustainable, skilled, and inclusive workforce to support the UK's ambitions? Sort of how optimistic, I guess, are you that the UK can make a significant impact in the global AI race, if that's what we call it?
So I think if we can really demonstrate that we're sharing standards, we have tapped into diverse talent, and we can scale the skill set we have at pace by a structure to help us to do that, I think we can prevail. But I think we need to be more joined up in the approach. At the moment, the pace is fast, but in actual fact, if you drill down to it sometimes, and I take companies like ours and you have visibility of in some instances on some data centers, you have visibility for the next year and a half. But if you had actually the next 2 to 3 years, because there's a 5 year massive spike going to happen. I think if there was more sharing of the pipeline of the demands by the locations in the regions, we could more proactively pinpoint those regions and then do more in those areas as well. But I think scaling those skills and the diverse talent is key, absolutely key. That's where we're going to win by tapping into those.
Okay, I mean, it's been brilliant to chat, Claire, and thank you so much for sharing so many great insights into what's going on. It's clearly a fast-moving pace,
Yeah,
and I think joined up thinking collaboration, as you've outlined, is the way forward. And it's sometimes frustrating to see it's not quite happening as it should, but hopefully things will be changing. And
it will. Yeah.
yeah, and it's great,
Thank,
great. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
thank you.